Hi, this is Fred Meyer from WP Shout, and this is the fourth and final, for now, Q&A session, open Q&A session on WordPress development for up and running buyers. And let's launch into it. So I'm just here for literally any questions you have about the entire kind of world of WordPress development, including the material and up and running, but also things you're running into on your own projects with clients, anything. So let's launch in. Robert says to check my temperature because I was coughing a little bit. I don't think that's the problem. So what can I help with? So feel free to either unmute yourself or put it into chat. Okay, Robert asks, how would you find the correct place to hook into a template? Robert, I'm wondering if you want to unmute yourself and kind of flesh the question out a little bit.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. If you're working on a site for somebody and you need to hook into, for example, we'd say the blog feed page, and you want to add an element to each excerpt, just an example, how would you go about figuring out what is the correct place to hook in to that template file? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the question I think makes sense. So one of the, I would say, challenges in understanding WordPress's event-driven system, so in other words, its hook system, is you may understand how hooks work, but that doesn't mean that anybody has in their mind a complete picture of the WordPress hooks that exist. And that's just the sort of stock or default WordPress hooks. So your theme and your plugins may, or in fact certainly will, add hooks of their own. And if you're working with something like WooCommerce or Genesis, we're talking hundreds or thousands of custom hooks that that those projects add into WordPress. So basically, Google is your friend on this one. So I mean, just thinking out loud, how would I hook onto the excerpt and let's say, change, the word, poetry to whatever, prose or something like that, right? So, well, let's have a look. WordPress hook into the excerpt. The excerpt, this is a function. Okay, so there is a the excerpt hook. And yeah, so this is where I'd start. It's obviously a filter hook, which is exactly what you asked for, the ability to filter on the excerpt. Yeah. And yeah, I would go from here. So just the same way that there's the content filter hook or the title, it appears that WordPress has done the logical thing and created the excerpt filter hook as well. Now, did I know that before I Googled for it? No, I did not. So really, Google is your friend here. And if you're trying to, WooCommerce hook, just to give you an example of a plugin that has a ton of hooks that it leaves just dangling around. Like let's say hook before taxes, I don't know. Let's just sort of see
a bit how I feel with what I'm doing at the moment. It's a random search for things it might be.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, you just, knowing how to Google strategically is really a ton of this job, is the truth. I mean, nobody has all this knowledge in their head, but to just sort of have a good intuition about how do I write this Google query and what am I actually asking is a ton of it. So, if I mean, and here's the other thing is like knowing what's easy and what's not easy. It's not always easy to find the hook you should be talking to. I just spent the 90 minutes before this call literally looking through a very complicated plugin called Events Manager, trying to find the right hooks to pull out a piece of information that I need to change. And it's very difficult. And I actually ended up going through its code and finding a cite option instead. So the point I'm making is, if you're billing clients, let's say, and you spent an hour and a half searching through WooCommerce's documentation for the right hook to use to change, you know, to change like how an order is taxed if the person's ordering from the Bahamas. Like, you're not doing anything wrong. These things are not easy.
Okay.
Yeah, does that help? I'm not sure if I kind of scratched the itch of your question or not.
No, it absolutely does help, because I started to think I'm doing something wrong, and exactly as you described, I've spent hours trying to find the right place to hook in to get this thing just to add even anything at full stop, anything, so I would know I'm in the right spot. And it is a lot of research, and I just thought maybe there is a trick to where you'd find these particular things, but it is, like you said, half of it is knowing how to Google things properly.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and it's also knowing where you need to be using WordPress's hook system and where you need to be using the WordPress template hierarchy. So, you know, if you want every page on your website to look a particular way, that's a template hierarchy thing. You just kind of go and you just create a child theme and write a new page.php.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to, you know, filter on the excerpt of every one of your posts, that sounds more like a, you know, a WordPress hooks thing. So there's no soup. Yeah, I mean, familiarity helps, but still, you know, if you're in an unfamiliar area, like I've never filtered on the excerpt before, so I had to see if such a thing even existed. Sorry, that's my 9-month-old. I had to see if such a thing even existed, and turns out it does. And I happened to write the right kind of Google search to figure that out.
Yeah. Part of mine is that my difficulty is that it is a theme, a premium theme, so I'm a layer removed from the direct normal WordPress.
Yeah, I mean,
hooks.
hopefully the theme has documentation. And, you know, one thing to look for in a theme is that it's actually thoughtfully documented, which like most random theme forest themes are not going to be. But, you know, like the Beaver Builder theme is going to be pretty well documented, or I think the Aster theme is probably pretty well documented. Oh, and one other thing is, you know, knowing how to kind of run a text search across like an entire, you know, file system, like let's say an entire theme folder. So if you have a text editor that you like a code editor, you can basically search. You can download the theme folder and just search the entire thing for the word excerpt, for example, and you know, start to get a sense. So it really does get as literal as like, I'm trying to change the colors of, you know, I'm trying to get rid of the footer widgets. So let me do a search for, you know, footer across this entire theme, because I'm not seeing it in footer.php and I'm not seeing it in functions.php, and there's about 80 other files. So yeah, it's not easy. Oh, Lisa's saying occasionally I have used a show hooks plugin. Lisa, do you want to unmute yourself and say a little bit about that? Because I think I'm familiar with that, but I don't think I've ever used it myself, or if I have, it's been a long time.
It's been a while, so I don't remember exactly what one. Like some years ago, I used some Genesis themes, and everything that you want to customize in Genesis, you basically have to do with hooks. And so at that time, I used a Show Genesis Hooks plugin, and it just gives you the ability, I think, in your admin bar to switch on a visual representation. It's crazy. Like there's so many, obviously. And the same thing is available for not Genesis themes also. I just Googled it. I see one called Simply Show Hooks. So I can't recommend any particular one right now, but it did really help me see on the front end where some of those things kind of physically were.
Fantastic. Might save me hours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. That's great advice. Okay, what else can we help with?
You don't happen to have a default styling for things like the widgets to remove the unordered list bullet points and all of this kind of stuff? It's one of those things that every time I start a project, I'm like, oh man, I gotta go and start this all over again.
I see. You're talking about
need
some
this,
sort of like CSS reset, like that kind of thing.
that kind of an idea, yeah, but applicable to things like in the footer where you might add a navigation menu, and you don't want to have to restyle it every single time you're starting a I'm just being lazy here, being honest with you. I mean, I'm sure I can go back through projects and find stuff and copy and paste it out and screw it back to a very basic thing, but I forget about it on the next time around, and then I just soldier on and do it the long way around rather than go right thing back into projects.
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's what's occurring to me to kind of say in response to that is it's rare that you should be building a WordPress theme from scratch. In fact, I almost can't think of a situation where you'd want to do that. Maybe I can. Like, let's say if it was a huge project and you wanted it to be, and you wanted to understand every line of code because you wrote it yourself. Like, you know, somebody's got a budget of $100,000 and they're like, this site has to be the fastest thing on the internet. And, you know, I want you to maintain it for the next 10 years. So you have to understand every single line of code. Then maybe I would build the site completely from scratch, starting with nothing. But, you know, in order of simplicity, like going from most complicated to simplest, you can use a WordPress starter theme. Underscores is a decent one. Understrap is one that I've used quite a bit. Understrap is just underscores and it pulls in Twitter Bootstrap. So the kind of Twitter Bootstrap is just like a front end way of thinking about a 12 column grid and some other things. So you could do that. You could use, you know, underscores or understrap. There's a bunch of like WordPress starter themes, and I've tried a lot of them and haven't really been crazy about them, is the truth. Even understrap, it has this very weird behavior around drop-down menus that you can't turn off. Basically, it's hard to describe, but here, actually, let me try to show you. So I'll just kind of show you, like, sorry about all the tabs here, as usual. So like, you see this, you know, this drop-down menu here? If this had been built in Understrap, when I hover this link would be unclickable. I could not, it will only let you click the drop-down elements. It will not let you, so like, this could be a clickable link, but then if there's drop-down elements, then there's nothing, like you cannot click the top, you cannot have clickable both top level and drop-down elements. And it's according to the guy who wrote Understrap, it's some sort of accessibility thing. But I think I've never seen, I've never worked on a site where that was the behavior I wanted. And it actually takes several hours to rewrite Understrap's menu functionality to work the way I'm expecting. So that's a huge that's like kind of the one downside I've run into with Understrap, but it's a pretty huge one in my opinion. But that said, Understrap is still, I would say, the best, like super basic starter theme that I've run into. And sorry about my 9-month-old. Hold on 1 second. Hey babe, she's about to drop that. Would you figure something out there? So that would be kind of the most difficult that I would start with, is like starting from like Understrap. And it doesn't give you a lot out of the box, but what it does is it'll do like a CSS reset, like you're saying. It pulls in Twitter Bootstrap. It, you know, goes to the trouble of creating an index.php and a functions.php and a suggested kind of like directory structure for your site. And it just saves you like maybe 20 hours of work or maybe more. And then, you know, going from there, it's like if, you know, for almost any project with a budget smaller than maybe, you know, $5, $10, $20,000, I would use probably the Beaver Builder theme or maybe the Astra theme. I think the Astra theme is easier to work with and it's a little more full featured, but it's also just a little bit buggier. You know, so for a client project that I felt like I really had to get right, I would use the Beaver Builder theme. And, you know, out of the box, the Beaver Builder theme doesn't make a lot of decisions for you, but it does the kinds of things you're saying. It like handles how, you know, Internet Explorer 10 thinks about websites or whatever.
Yeah.
It handles, you know, it handles like how ordered lists should look by default, how unordered lists should look by default. It probably pulls in like a clear fix class, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I would I can't think of a time when I've started from absolutely nothing building a theme. And you know, for a $1,000 project, I'd probably put it on Astra and just be 70% done, you know, in the first half hour. For a $5,000 or $10,000 project, I might use maybe the Beaver Builder theme for a little more stability, or maybe something like Understrap. But I certainly, I think, wouldn't be coding it from scratch. Again,
Yeah,
I
just
don't know if,
overthinking it, I guess.
well, it's more like doing things by hand that you can almost always, like if you can find good starter themes out there, like if you find one you like, whether it's, again, the ones that I'm comfortable with are Astra, Beaver Builder, and Understrap, and there's some other good ones. If you can find one you like, you can use that as the bedrock for almost any project that you work on. Now, if you're gonna, you know, take a site and completely kind of tear it apart, like, you know, like the WP Shout nav menu is on this, it's sort of like vertically stacked on the side in a kind of unusual way, you know. And did I build the WP Shout theme completely from scratch, or did I start with something? No, I started with something. I started with something like Understrap. The point, you know, this is a pretty unusual layout for a website with the kind of nav menu vertically like this and stuff. So it would be kind of hard to start with, like, let's say the Beaver Builder theme and build into this. But even in this case, I think I started with Understrap and just heavily modified it. So yeah, I would recommend looking into starter themes, and those should be the closest thing to what it sounds like you're asking for, which is just like some boilerplate CSS and, you know, some of the other basic stuff that you're gonna need to do on every single site you work on.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
I'm after installing Simply Show Hooks as a plugin.
Yeah.
And the level of information is incredible.
That's good. Yeah, I think that was a great idea from Lisa. I hope that helps you. Yeah, and I'll actually play with that too when we get off the line, just to see if maybe, you know, I could have wasted less of my morning. I don't think so, but I'm open to the possibility. Okay, who else has a question? Can be about anything. Can be about how to find clients, how to work with a page filter plugin, anything. Recommendations for building courses. So you're saying how to host. Oh, okay. Okay. So give me a second on that, Robert. Alyssa asks, I was wondering if you're going to update Up and Running to reflect Gutenberg. Yes, we absolutely are. So Up and Running right now, the section on Gutenberg is from shortly before Gutenberg made it into WordPress core. And of course, Gutenberg is in WordPress core now. So yeah, we're going to be putting out a version 4 of Up and Running within the next 6 to 12 months. And when we do, you guys will obviously all get access. And we will update the section on Gutenberg. I will say a couple things. Number one is that a lot of the statements that Up and Running currently makes about Gutenberg, I think are true, continue to be true. They are in the form of predictions rather than statements, but I believe they are correct. So, you know, I think we're still in a world where Gutenberg needs to get better, and in particular, somebody needs to put it on the front end. So, you know, Beaver Builder's on the front end. You kind of live edit what you're looking at is what you're editing, and when you hit publish, that's the web page that people see. Gutenberg is on the back end. You're editing in the editing screen, and then you hit publish, and then you go to the part that people see. And somebody needs to put Gutenberg on the front end for it to really compete with page builders, and that's a huge challenge. And for various reasons, I don't think it's something that the WordPress core team is ever going to do, basically because it's too hard to do that and have it work across all WordPress sites. which is the bar that the core team has to hit. So Gutenberg needs, in my opinion, to have like some third party do that. So it could look like something like Beaver Builder's, underlying design element it changes from like their own kind of hand rolled nested div structure into Guten blocks, let's say. And at that point, I think Gutenberg will be the way to do layout creation in WordPress. But right now, I use Gutenberg maybe 10% of the time for post creation. I use the classic editor maybe 90% of the time, just because I'm so familiar with it. And I use a page builder 100% of the time for complex layout creation, like creating home pages and landing pages and that kind of thing. And for that equation to change, I continue to think that Gutenberg needs to be further developed. And the other thing is, there is a PHP side, I believe, to registering custom Guten blocks, but Up and Running is largely about the PHP core of WordPress. And Gutenberg, it has a little bit of a PHP end to it, but registering new Guten blocks is largely an exercise in writing JavaScript and using Gutenberg. I mean, Gutenberg is a mostly JavaScript-based component of WordPress. So we will definitely update Up and Running to include more content about Gutenberg, but maybe mostly the PHP side of Gutenberg, which is relatively limited. And in the meantime, I think what Up and Running says about Gutenberg, which is it's wonderful that we have this, but for it to compete with page builders, it'll need to get a lot better. I still think that's actually pretty much the truth. Damashe says, thanks for the recent PHP free course, by the way. You are super welcome. I was so excited to get that out the door. And we're working on basically a premium version of the same thing that has like a ton of code exercises. So that basically our timeline is that, and then kind of rolling that and Up and Running into like one giant learning package. Okay, so Robert asks, Alyssa, is there anything you'd like? Okay, yeah, I got you, Robert. So let's talk about what we're talking about is LMS's, learning management systems, and we'll talk about that in a second. Alyssa, is there anything in particular about Gutenberg that you'd like to discuss, just since you brought the question up? You can either maybe type in chat or, yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself, please. That'd be great.
Oh, okay. Hi. Yeah, I do. Can you hear me? Because I got headphones on too, so I'm just making sure.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. Then I know this works. I do a lot of actually, like I do have to. I work for the University of Texas in the research department, and I spent about a year building the site and with Gutenberg and doing the whole Gutenberg blocks. And it was a major challenge at first, I have to say. And I know a lot of people fight against that. But and it's interesting because I followed a tutorial this past week. I was trying to build my own block.
Yeah.
And it's a combination of the React and the PHP. You have to be able to, and it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any logical sense at all. Like,
really?
It's like, here you do an underscore, there you do a dash. I mean, like,
oh, no.
And you have to really. So it's been a challenge for some stuff, and now I have this idea of a theme that I'm trying to build. Like, in other words, the design is sort of there, but now I'm trying to code it and build it for WordPress, and that's constantly a challenge for me in some ways. I find that if I didn't have the WordPress part, I probably could build it faster. We do use WordPress themes as a general rule for the department, so I can't go off script for that. But it's so I'm not exactly sure, except for more. And I'm really good with the blocks now. I can do the when it comes to the page, and I'm thinking now I'll probably just build some Gutenberg page templates within the blocks, if that makes sense, instead of going to the coding. Like, I think that there's a way to do that I can just save out a page of Gutenberg blocks to look like the theme to match the theme that I want to do. but I haven't quite tried that yet because I have a zillion things I have to do, and that's that's just like one of them. I'm very fortunate. I'm working from home and I have a lot to do. But
Yeah.
because I also do design. I'm also a graphic designer. So there's a lot of that involved. So
Got
the
it.
coding part is not as easy for me. Do you know what I mean? Like HTML, CSS, I'm a whiz. Some JavaScript, but the PHP is a learning curve. So
I gotcha.
do this free course because
I
haven't
gotcha.
tried it yet.
Okay, well, I mean, the experience you had sounds, I guess the way it is, you know, I've kind of developed this set of pretty strongly held beliefs about Gutenberg, both the good and the bad. And I repeat myself so often that I always wonder, is this just the way I feel about things? Or, you know what I mean? Like, am I just talking to myself, you know? And so the experience you've had sounds exactly like how I think Gutenberg is, which is, you can build an entire site, you know, using Gutenberg blocks and creating custom blocks when needed. But it's really difficult. You do have to know PHP, and you have to be good in both PHP, and React.js. And then still you're kind of working with like a back-endy thing when you want to be working on the front end. Still you're working with pretty primitive implementation of actual layout, like columns, for example, are very primitive in Gutenberg, and there's no kind of semblance of like the sort of row columns structure that third-party, that paid page builders think in. So I think the experience you had is exactly the experience I would predict, for better and worse. And now that you've done the work, you have a site, and I haven't seen the site obviously, but you have a site that like is just using WordPress core, functionality. So it's always going to work, even if Beaver Builder and every other third-party company goes out of business. That the site is still going to work because you're just using WordPress stock stuff. And it is a nice editor interface once everything is built. Like somebody who's just somebody who's not a WordPress expert can come in and they can say, oh, this block, this is a team block. Okay, well, I want to edit my bio, and I want to add like a new publication, and I think I can figure out how to do that. Whereas if they're getting into Beaver Builder, there's probably more of a learning curve, I would say. So it's like you did the hard work up front. It was rough. And now it sounds like you have a thing that's pretty much it's got a lot of upsides. You're just using WordPress core software. It probably is a pretty easy editor interface for people to use. And yeah, that's exactly the experience I would predict. And it's like you have to think about those trade-offs. Like the only other good option, in my opinion, would have been to use a page builder the whole way through. And the trade-offs there are you're relying on third-party software, which could, break or, whatever. And it's a little bit harder, I would say, probably to train, non-technical people in using Beaver Builder than it is to just give them a block that they literally can't break. So, although I do think Beaver Builder has the option to like make things editable by role. In other words, if you're, let's say, an author but not an administrator, there's certain things on the page you can't edit. So I should give them credit. I don't know about that functionality. I just believe it exists. So yeah, it sounds like exactly what would happen if you tried to build all the layouts in a website using Gutenberg. And now that you're kind of up the learning curve, I think it's maybe a good way to go. But I would probably, even on a large site for a large organization like like a university, I would probably still see what mileage I could get out of a page builder. So I don't know if those thoughts are helpful. I actually have no idea.
Yeah, they didn't want to purchase a theme. They really wanted this thing built. So they gave me the time. I can't fault them for that because, like I said, it was a learning curve plus trying to build this site, which is different. Like the design is different, I think, than most of the stuff that you've seen. But it was interesting. So since I was so experienced with using Gutenberg blocks, I went to a local WordPress club and went and demonstrated it, and the hostility towards using these things was like amazing.
Yeah, well,
but whatever. Just saying, it was very interesting. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, there was kind of this.
That was probably about a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably cooled slightly, but there was really this sort of secondary. I mean, a lot of that was meaningless drama, I would say. You know, it's just like, I don't know. I guess when a community gets large enough, almost any decision causes a large amount of meaningless drama. But, you know, there were also some, like, Gutenberg as a project was really kind of heavily, like, it wasn't like, oh, you know, 1,000 people have weighed in and, you know, 550 of them think we should do this, so we're going to wander in this direction. It was like a very focused project reflecting the will of essentially one specific person. And
that's interesting.
yeah, and I think it was the right call for WordPress, and I think somebody with that kind of sharpness of vision needed to push it through because it was such a heavy lift, you know, and it was such a specific project and it was so difficult that I think it needed somebody with a lot of clarity of vision to push it through. But it left a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because WordPress is this open source system that doesn't have a dictator. And then we kind of woke up, and in a lot of people's experience, it turns out we do. And so, yeah, I would say, you know, people's hostility was probably 60% just like kind of silly drama, and 40%, you know, real, like, well-founded concerns about what is the actual future of the governance of the WordPress project. So I guess, I don't know if that has any context, but.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa.
Thanks. Thank you.
Damashe asks, has anyone tried ACF blocks? That is a good question, and I'm not even sure what that is. I mean, ACF is obviously advanced custom fields, but I don't know what their blocks implementation looks like. Damashe, do you want to say anything more about it, or is anybody familiar with that? Okay, well, let's leave that for now. And Damashe, if at any point you do want to say a little bit more about it. Okay, I've just heard about it. It's a way to build, oh, interesting. It's a way to build Goodin blocks with ACF. I don't know the first thing about that because I'm pretty removed from Gutenberg at the moment. So I don't have much to add, but I will definitely look into that. It sounds really interesting. Okay, cool. So Robert asks recommendations for building courses, and he then follows up and says, for example, WP Complete, Restrict Content Pro, MemberPress, LearnDash, etc. Good question. So we're talking about, these are called LMSs, or learning management systems. And the truth is, to my knowledge, there is not a great learning management system in WordPress. The best, I would say, is, or certainly the one that's best known, is LearnDash. But I've used LearnDash, and it just really shows this kind of the strain of turning WordPress, which is, you know, originally blogging software, now retrofitted to be website creation software. It shows the strain of turning that into learning management software. You have like all these host types. You have like a course, and then like a session, and a quiz, and it's like they all talk to each other in this very clumsy way. It's like the way they interact is through like you manually setting what feel like custom fields. So I'm not going to complain about LearnDash, you know, forever, but the point is I found it really hard to use. And it is what I would use for like a, you know, like a small course implementation. But if I was, you know, trying to, you know, create, let's say if I wanted my main income stream to be I sell courses online, I would be really hesitant to use LearnDash for that. Yeah, and I'm not aware of something that is entirely for courses that is an LMS in WordPress that's better than LearnDash. So I just think it's one of those things where WordPress itself is just different enough from the way you would want a learning management system to work that there's just not a great implementation. It's like BuddyPress. Like BuddyPress is as good as you can do to make WordPress act like Facebook, but that just turns out to not be that good because WordPress as a chunk of software, and particularly the way the database is structured, is so different from how you would want to structure the database of a social network. So I think it's the same issue with LearnDash. Yeah, Robert says they all feel like putting a square peg in a round hole. And it's like, that's exactly right. Well said, yes. So what did we use with Up and Running? So we kind of rolled our own. And, we really tried. I mean, we really did our due diligence. We looked, to see what we could see. Here, let me drop the screenshot. Let me just try to log into courses to the Up and Running courses site here. Okay, wrong password. Let's see. Ugh. Okay, so we're in. I'll show my screen. So we use MemberPress, and we use MemberPress to take payment, first of all, and then to track what people are subscribed to. So in other words, like, you're subscribed, you're subscribed to Up and Running Deluxe, or you're subscribed to like the developer version of WordPress Security with Confidence. And then how we actually deliver the content is pretty, I mean, we basically did it ourselves. We just created a custom post type and we added a bunch of stuff to it. So like the breadcrumbs we did ourselves, or like the section headings, the way the section headings like interact with the articles is we basically rolled our own. So this is kind of how it looks on the back end. This is like a MemberPress shortcode. So I believe it's still the case that like the core version of Up and Running, doesn't come with these chapter videos. And so this shortcode is basically managing that. And then the rest of it is just, content in a custom post, in a post of a custom post type. And then we used something called WP Complete. It's a plugin, I believe a free plugin called WP Complete to track, completion through the chapters. And so it's like, it's very, and then I think we coded the breadcrumbs ourselves. So it's like very much a roll your own thing. We didn't use something out of the box. And I think, it could be a lot richer. Like I think that, like if you go onto a like a good learning management software, page or site, they're like, you're 30% complete on this. You've completed 2 of 6 badges. Your next quiz expires in 12 hours. Like, don't drop your streak. You've, logged in every day of the past 5 days. And it's like, I think to get that kind of like, wow, this is really good kind of experience, you almost have to go out. You either have to, you pretty much have to go outside of WordPress, I think. And depending on what kind of courses you're trying to sell, I'm actually not sure of what the best LMS outside of WordPress LMS course options are. But I would recommend, looking into that if you're looking for something, spiffy. And of course, the kind of like the ultimate in some way would be to roll your own using like a framework like Laravel or like maybe Node.js and React. And these are things that David, my business partner, would know how to do, but that I would not. But when I think about like LMS software done really, really, really well, the place my mind goes to is this website Laracasts, which is it's a course platform to originally teach Laravel, the PHP framework. I think they've branched out, but it's just like it's so cool. It lists the series and the video counts, and you're going through and there's the, I don't know, it's just really beautifully done. And how did they do it? I don't know. I suspect they did it in Laravel. And they probably have some sort of JavaScript interactivity on the front end as well. So like to get to this in WordPress, it's pretty hard to do, in my opinion. Yep, so not a great answer, but that has been my experience. Okay. And in terms of like, yeah, like a membership section, like restricting content, we have used Restrict Content Pro and we're currently using MemberPress. They both have downsides and they both have upsides. I think we're happy with MemberPress overall. We ran into this one difficulty with them where it's like one person can't have multiple tiers of the same thing at the same time. It's like if you're trying to give people multiple subscriptions on the same thing, which I needed to do that for a client. I can't even remember why. But anyway, there is this like hard limit to MemberPress that I ran into a year or two, and now I can't really remember the specifics. But for what we're trying to do with it, we really like it. Okay, Alyssa, nice to see you. Yeah, Robert, I think for, yeah, restricting people's, you know, for like a members area, I think MemberPress is, it's the thing we've been happiest with, and it's the thing we're currently using. Okay, what else can I help with? Rabbit asks, how's the lockdown treating me? Pretty good, actually. My wife's been home. And it's this is a really, I mean, obviously the lockdown is horrible in a lot of ways, and I'm worried about the future of the economy. And I actually know somebody who passed away, I believe, from COVID-19. I didn't know him well, but somebody in my kind of extended network, did pass away. So obviously, it's a horrible thing, but my experience of it has been nice in a lot of ways. I've gotten to spend more time with my wife, and she's gotten to spend more time with our daughter. So weird, like silver linings thing. Yeah. How's it treating you? Yeah, find them where we can, exactly. Okay, well, I think there's few enough of us in the call that you guys can just feel free to unmute whenever you want. And yeah, so it's just kind of literally anything you wish you knew about WordPress development, how to get clients, how to set your rates, when to quit your day job. Any idea when the PHP course will be available? Thank you for asking. Definitely within the next 6 months, hopefully within the next 3 months, I would say. And yeah, we're really excited about it. And in the meantime, the free PHP course has I think it was 16 articles in it. So there's quite a bit there. Anything else? How to find clients, when to quit your day job. How does WP Query work? What hosting to buy? Lisa asks, Flexible Posts widget plugin, which is integrated heavily into the custom theme on my inherited site, okay, hasn't been updated in 3 years. It creates a widget with a post feed from any taxonomy and with widget templates. Interesting. Any ideas for a similar alternative? Lisa, would you unmute yourself and maybe say a little bit more about kind of the use case here? So it creates widgets pulling from, what is the post feed of, oh, so it creates a widget that is like your 5 most recent food reviews or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, it does. And it's coded into the theme, and there are little templates for the widget. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel comfortable using a plugin that's not been updated in 3 years, but it's very enmeshed. So I don't know if there's another. People are always looking for good widget plugins. Mm. And I don't know one to replace it exactly. So I just thought I'd throw it out there in case anybody.
It's a good question. How, when you say it's deeply enmeshed into the site, what's it being used for?
Well, on the homepage of the site, there's a regular post feed, but it counts. And so like after 2 regular posts displaying. There will be like a big sidebar with a couple of posts that are specific to a taxonomy. And then there'll be like a few more regular posts, and then there's a big sidebar with a couple of posts that are specific to another taxonomy. Taxonomy
And
term.
are the sidebars literally on the side, or are they? It's
No.
So it's like posts, then posts from a
Sections.
taxonomy. So there's sections: posts, then posts from a taxonomy, then posts from another taxonomy, like that.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
it's one taxonomy but different terms. So they have a taxonomy called series, and so there will be a section with the most recent posts in a particular category of the series taxonomy. And so because that's integrated, it's coded into the front page, and the widgets themselves have their own template. It's very enmeshed, and so I need to really rethink it, but I just thought there might be another widget. This whole thing about flexible widgets, like this is always a thing. People are always wanting to know how to get widget replacements or sidebar replacements or so this one has a lot of capabilities, but it's been abandoned.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, really good question. So let's first of all, let's just take a look here. Yeah, the GitHub project for it, it doesn't have anything newer than about 5 or 6 years. So that's an issue. Okay, well, here is probably how I would approach this. It is not too difficult to, I mean, how intricate are the templates that you're describing? I mean, how
probably not very.
Okay, yeah. So how I would probably approach this is I would look at the CSS on the front page and kind of pull the most important parts of it while understanding that the markup itself is going to change. So in other words, if it says, widget, okay, let's say all the widget sections are on a gray background, let's say. So the CSS is going to be written like widget, dot widget space dot widget body or whatever, background is gray, But I would keep the gray background part and understand that the markup is going to change. And I would probably just sort of de-widgetize this entire process and do it either by modifying the front page.php page template, or maybe by writing one or more shortcodes. So just to say a little bit, let me close some tabs here. I showed this in a previous week, but the thing you're describing is rather similar to how part of or arguably most of the WP Shell homepage works. So, we've got some little text here and a mailing list subscribe, and then we've got, these kind of articles that we're pulling up custom. All of these are Beaver Builder modules. And then you get to our recently published feed, and this whole thing is just a giant shortcode. And what the shortcode does is a lot like what you were saying. It pulls out one article, and then it pulls out the next 4 articles and puts them in this layout. And then it pulls a reverse chronological list of our most recent links and quick guides. And so it's doing this by post type, but it could just as easily be working by taxonomy. And the way we chose to do that, I think originally we had just coded the front page.php page template to be that scroll. And then it came time to actually build our front page in Beaver Builder, but we still wanted that scroll. So I just picked up all the PHP that was in front page.php, wrapped it in a shortcode, and then serve the shortcode using just a Beaver Builder HTML module. And the benefit that that has is you are just coding exactly what it is that you, exactly how it is that you want that section of the page to behave. And really the core, coding topic that you would need to understand to be able to do that would be WP query. So really what's happening is you're querying for the 2 most recent posts, and then you're querying for 2 posts from this taxonomy, and then you're querying for the 3rd and 4th most recent posts or something like that, and then you're querying for 2 more posts from another taxonomy. Each one of those things could be a custom WP query that you could write, or you could even sort of finesse it and write one giant WP query and get a bunch of posts back, and then sort of finesse the array that you got, the array of posts that you got back, so that it was like post, post, post from taxonomy, post from taxonomy, and then the only thing to do would be to kind of reincorporate the CSS. So what you could do is put it on, a different, like, put it on, let's say put it on a staging site, get the right post showing up, like even if you could just get the right post title, just as like a list of a bulleted list, post title 1, post title 2, post title from taxonomy 1, post title from taxonomy 2. If you could get that, then you would know you could get the rest in place. And so it's a mixture of rewriting this behavior, cutting widgets completely out and just rewriting it in PHP, either into the page template or into a shortcode, and then designing, basically reworking the CSS that's applying to the front page currently to look the same while targeting different elements, because you're removing all references to widgets. And what you'd be left with at the end of that process would be something that doesn't really use a plugin at all, and just relies on stock WordPress functionality, the ability to write custom queries. So I mean, depending on how much you like or dislike writing WP queries and registering shortcodes and stuff, like that could sound like a lot of work, or like not too much. Unless it's like, I would expect to spend, for me, I would probably spend a few hours on it, probably 4, it's like you think it's going to take you an hour and a half and it ends up taking you 4 hours, probably like that. But if you're, less familiar with like querying for the post from a particular taxonomy using WP query, or less familiar with rewriting complex CSS rules or something like that, it could be kind of a big lift. So I'm curious what you think about that.
What a good learning experience.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
That's totally fine. I think one reason that they used the plugin and it was widgetized is so that the site owner or the site administrator can change what it is displaying. But I'm going to think about this too, because there could be a way to write those short codes in a way that they could enter. I don't know.
Yeah, shortcodes are almost always a bad experience for non-technical users. That's actually, shortcodes is one of the things that Gutenberg was created to destroy. For some, like the term that, I hate this term, it's so gross to me, but the term that like the core team used in developing Gutenberg was, they were like, well, shortcodes just publish mystery meat, meaning you look at a shortcode on the back end and you have no idea what it's going to look like on the front end. And so yeah, shortcodes aren't a great experience for end users. What you just said gave me a couple additional ideas. Let me see if I can.
Because I think, just to be more explicit, like this taxonomy is called series. And so let's say they are starting a new series of articles. In this case, it's called Guns in Our Lives.
Okay.
And so if they want to start a new series about COVID-19, and they had this flexible widget thing going on, they could take care of changing what's in that area.
Yeah, so in that case, I think shortcodes maybe are not your best bet. Let me see, like, so that means that maybe the two options you'd really want to look at would be creating a custom Gutenberg block, which would be very easy for them to edit. As we've heard earlier on this call, it would be possibly quite a learning curve because it's in 2 languages and that kind of thing. But the end product would be very nice for your instructors. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. Would be very nice for your site owners. Or I think probably the answer you should really go with, actually, now that I've talked up, short codes and writing custom queries and all that, the thing you should probably go with is learning how to do this with Beaver Builder modules. So I'm just going to show you the Beaver Builder post module here. This is on the writers.com homepage. There's like this blog section. We're basically linking to the blog section, and it looks like I built this by hand or something, but it's actually just the post module of Beaver Builder, and it's pulling the 4 most recent blog articles. But you can go into content, right? It's a custom query, right? It's for posts of post type posts, a post. Mm-hmm. It's ordering by date, and you can filter on a taxonomy. So, hey, I only want, I only want posts that pertain to fiction, let's say. Mm. And it's just going to I guess all of those, unfortunately, our 4 most recent things are in the fiction category. So let's try this, see if it works. See, so it filtered out the most recent posts, and it's just retaining only the posts that are in this taxonomy, right? So it's the behavior you're looking for, more or less. And then you just have to figure out how to style it, which is basically a CSS question. So, you could, there's a couple of custom layouts you can choose from. So like, let's say you wanted, the simplest one might be the columns layout, but there's just one column, and then you could kind of go from there. So unless it's super complicated, there's a good, the filtering by taxonomies thing that you need is definitely present in the Beaver Builder post module. And so the only risk would be if what they've got going is so complex that it's difficult or impossible to use CSS to style the post module to exactly what they're looking for. But it would be kind of a nice compromise where you don't have to learn how to register custom Goodin blocks. You don't have to write a bunch of PHP and leave a shortcode that people can't use. You give them something that's drag and drop where they just have to know to come to this tab, and it's all kind of written out in English. They're not staring at code, and it's fairly easy to do. So yeah, I think trying to do it with a page builder would be probably the option I would look into most if they need to be able to change these things themselves. Another option you could look into would be creating a custom Goodin block, and that would probably be the highest quality option overall, but I think it would also be possibly the most difficult. So yeah, I don't know.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm tempted because this theme is so terrible anyway. If I can redo the homepage, it might be worth it, to install Beaver Builder and just start fresh.
Yeah, especially if you've never used Beaver Builder before, I really recommend getting familiar with it. It really adds something that, page builders are an incredibly helpful addition to WordPress, but for the longest time there were no good ones. So it was wow, we have planes, which is amazing, but the planes, crash every couple of months, so that's not good. And then at some point it's plane travel is incredibly helpful and safe. And that's where, in my mind, Beaver Builder is that way. Elementor is kind of the runner-up to me. I've heard good things about the Oxygen Builder, but never tried it. And I have actively kind of low opinions of Divi and Visual Composer. So it really is, it's worth the time to see what a page builder can do for you. Page builders are a good replacement for widgets in general. And then Gutenberg is designed to be a replacement as well for widgets. And I think it has a mixed record depending on what you're trying to do what you're trying to use it for. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Matt says, how would you learn to build Gutenberg blocks? Are there any courses to learn it? Also, are blocks mobile responsive by default? Good questions. I have never built a custom Guten block. Let me just do a Google search and see what comes up. We're going, actually, I think David participated in this like very difficult project to write the official documentation. Like I think David helped write this tutorial in the block editor, I think, I'm not sure. And then it looks like this Delicious Brains article is ranking pretty highly. Torque Mag. And CSS Tricks. I mean, I really like Torque Magazine. I really like CSS Tricks, and I really like Delicious Brains in general. So these are probably the places I'd start. Maybe the, you know, maybe the official handbook, especially because I think David helped write it. Don't quote me on that. He helped with something, but I'm not 100% sure if it was this. And then I just, you know, I just like skim these tutorials and see if I found one that I thought was speaking to me in plain English. Yeah, the Torque one looks okay. It's very visual. That's nice. CSS Tricks often has like the best, like CSS Tricks is often the best on a particular topic. So these are the places I would start. And let me just look and see if Zach Gordon, who teaches, let me just look. There's two people. Well, there's many people that I really like as WordPress educators, but Zach Gordon is one of them. Yeah, so I'm not sure what. Okay, so there's a, yeah. Okay, so there's a course from Zach Gordon that's $159. And if you've got that money to spend, then I can almost guarantee it's very high quality. Zach's just really, really good. And then I really like Josh Pollock as a WordPress educator. Let me see what he did on Gutenberg. He did the Gutenberg block basics thing, but it's been a while. So yeah, if you're looking to spend money, I would buy Zach's course, which is at gutenberg.courses/development, I guess, or just gutenberg.courses. And then if you're looking to not spend money, I would spend some time on the CSS Tricks and Torque Mag and maybe Delicious Brains article on the topic, and maybe the actual WordPress.org documentation. Okay, Matt asks, how do you detect touch versus mouse interaction on your sites? Oh my God, good question. So this is a JavaScript question. How do you detect touch versus mouse interaction on your sites? Oh, Robert, yeah, we're actually over time, aren't we? Robert says, I've got to go. Thanks for doing these sessions over the last few weeks. You are very welcome, my pleasure. Thank you so much for your really good questions, Robert. It's been great talking to you. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna try to tackle Matt's question about JavaScript interactions, and then maybe we'll call it unless anybody has a burning question. So how do you detect touch versus mouse interaction on your sites? Well, here's one thing I know is that the JavaScript click event handles both touch presses as well as mouse clicks. And the truth is, I have never needed to know the difference. I've never needed anything I built to know whether somebody was tapping or whether it was a mouse, a mouse button press. So Matt, do you want to say more about the use case there? What's the nature of your need to kind of know the difference between those events?
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay. It's regarding navigation menus. When I made my first site on WordPress, actually 2 sites now, I've been using basically a click functionality for all my navigation menus because I don't know if the user's using a touchscreen or not. So I just assume they are.
What is the click event handling? I guess what I'm asking is, so are your menus built entirely in, or like largely in JavaScript?
They're
Because,
based purely in jQuery, yeah.
huh. So I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but let me see if I can find.
Because I've looked up some things on the web, and they said that there's CSS3 things coming out that'll be able to detect that in the future, but they're not here yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I think the way that I'm inclined to look at this is, it's one of those things where you might be asking a question, you might be asking a very specific question because the more general way you're approaching your navigation menus is slightly wonky. It's possible. In other words, like the if you get down what feels like a rabbit hole where people are like, oh yeah, that's coming in CSS4 due out in 2022, you know, it's possible that you are approaching a little bit too narrowly, like something where the general way of doing it is quite a bit different. So in other words, it's like, how do I make my bike float in water, right? Like that could be the search. And it's like, well, there's probably some random answer somewhere on the internet about how to make your bike float in water. But if you're trying to make a bike float in water, there might be, you know, some odd decisions might have been made in the past. So I'm obviously not confident about that, but I'm just thinking out loud that that's a possibility. Like, let me kind of try to show you a little bit about what I understand about mobile navigation. And let me say this, I really try not to build nav menus myself because I find it very complicated.
Yeah, I found that the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of the things that like themes. It's like thank goodness for themes, because somebody had to sit down and figure out how to use the WordPress nav walker and all this stuff, right? But
actually, that's what I had to do with the project that I had. I actually had to go into the nav walker to be able to insert an SVG icon if it had, you know, if it had a, you know, some children that were under
gotcha.
the parent.
Yeah. So okay, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I guess what I would say is, so this thing where you've got this little icon and it's opening up like this is definitely JavaScript. I'm fairly sure.
Yeah,
but it doesn't.
That's kind of like the thing, like what I use. Mine just goes up and down when you click on it.
Mm-hmm. But see, this doesn't need to know whether I'm on a mouse, or I actually do physically have a touch screen on my laptop, so I can actually tap my screen and get the same effect. So the point is, it doesn't need to know which it is. And then most of the rest of the stuff, like the hover, like the fact that it turns white when you hover it, and you know what happens when you actually click it and stuff, like that's not JavaScript. That's a combination of HTML and CSS. And so, you know, a nav is built not mainly in JavaScript. It's built mainly in HTML and CSS with a little bit of JavaScript interactivity. And yeah, in terms of like, so I'm not, again, without looking, you know, deeply into the code of what you're trying to get your menu to do and how it's currently behaving, I'm not completely sure, you know, the story, but I will just say that in the customizing of nav menus that I've had to do in the past, I haven't had to distinguish between taps and clicks. And the other thing I'll say is, look at the colon after and colon before CSS pseudo selectors. And just in general, really look at CSS as an option for like, yeah, getting like a little, you know, like a little caret thing to show at the right of a thing that should drop down in a mobile nav. Like
yeah,
you can get those elements in there, you know, using CSS or using JavaScript.
Yeah, I've thought about using the after pseudo element too.
Yeah, yeah. So have a look at that, or you know, you can even put it in place. Like you could even put it in place on everything. Like everything has like a little caret after it. But it's display none in CSS unless it's got the has children class on it. You know, those kind of things. So like there's a lot of stuff you can do with pure, you know, HTML and CSS. It's just, I mean, you could probably technically even do the rotating animation in straight CSS as well. So I'm not really answering your question directly, but you know, look at CSS and HTML and see how creative you can get with those languages.
Yeah, mine is mostly built with HTML and CSS. It just adds the jQuery for the touch function or for the click function. That's all.
Yeah, let me think. Yeah, for sure. Right. That's how it should work. It's like you should click it and the little thing goes like this and it should. But you know what you can do? The click event can just add a CSS class. I mean, that should be the main thing it does.
Yeah, mine was actually switching. When I was doing it, I started out using Font Awesome, but then they became like a paid for
oh, really?
subscription-based thing, so I didn't want to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I made my own SVG, you know, drop down little icons, and I decided that I would use those instead, and I would on click I would change the source, and it would go to either the up or down caret.
Oh, interesting.
Meant,
yeah, I don't know. There's some best practice out there that I'm not totally familiar with. Whether you should be rotating the SVG or what, I really don't know.
It doesn't really rotate. It just kind of goes up and down. That's all.
Gotcha.
Just toggle.
I gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I didn't directly answer your question. I don't know how to tell the difference between taps and clicks. Yeah. And if I can possibly stay away from building nav menus, I do. But it sounds like yours is pretty close. So.
All right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Anything else, Ernie? Lisa says thank you. Thank you. You're very welcome. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I really enjoyed doing these calls. So I'm really going to be looking for ways to do more live webinar-y things like this. And I think I may send out some kind of feedback form to the folks who participated in one or more of these, because I'd love to, you know, I'd love to take this and sort of iterate on it and, you know, make these webinars as good as they can possibly be. So if I can go back and get a list of everybody who was in here, I might send you a form asking for feedback. But in the meantime, if you have any reflections on how this could have been, you know, even a better experience for you, just email contact@WP-Shout. I'd really love to read those thoughts, and I probably would actually incorporate a lot of them into future webinar stuff I do. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys are staying healthy and safe. And thanks for buying Up and Running. And if you have any questions at any point, you know, please be in touch. We're here to help. Okay.